This is our pal James. We've talked about him for a couple of weeks now. He's a master of control nets inside of Stable Diffusion.
Musk replied, James was like, we had to reply immediately back.
HTTTA.
It's how to talk to AI with your hosts, Goda and Wes, the synth mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, dogs, cats, robots, and everybody in between, especially you, first-time viewers on YouTube. That's right, we got a live podcast, everybody. Welcome to HTTTA, How to Talk to AI. I am your host in the flesh, the synth mind Wes. And as always, I am joined by the gracious, the globe-trotting, the galvanizing force of nature herself, never ghastly, always graceful, the Miss Go herself. Gee, how are you?
Thank you so much. Hi. With
Definitely.
audio, I could just be like, I'm always giggling with a huge smile. Your introductions are fantastic. Great. I'm excited about this video. Let's see how that goes. That's definitely something new.
Yes, indeed.
Well, not entirely new.
You have a little more experience in this realm than me, I'll admit.
Yeah, but it doesn't get easier. I really don't know how these people like Joe Rogan do it. It just feels like they don't even care with their camera.
Maybe they don't even think about it. Or maybe we can just get to a point where we can have AI do it for us. Generate live.
AI video. Let's go.
Yeah. So right to that, hey, let's jump right in. I recall a few months back, you did a video on RunwayML's Gen2 Text-to-Image generation. You want to just fill people in on kind of like your experience using that? Because we have some news that Gen 2 is out now.
It's 2023, and this is what I would do if I would learn video editing from scratch. I tested Gen 1, and I don't know if we talked about it, but my experience was that it was definitely not easy with Gen 1, but it was also beta version in Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Like suddenly, for example, you're prompting something like a character, and I would get a man with a beard. And I was like, is it trying to tell me something? But that being said, Gen 2 came out, and that's definitely a little bit different right now. And everyone's now snapping fingers. It's so funny.
It is pretty funny. So I think what you're seeing right here, this is a demo that Runway is offering on their website, little tutorial video on how to use Gen 1. And I think some of the flow, some of the content we're seeing right now is even more compelling. I'll start this one over real quick just to kind of get an idea of how it looks when people are snapping their fingers into entirely different times, personas.
And you see what's the difference? There's like sliders, the important part with like connectivity with the footage that you prompt. If you see all these videos, they are all based on original footage. So you upload a video and then you have a slider on how much of that video it takes as a reference point. This is like in a Stable Diffusion, when you control opacity of how much image is influencing your final image versus text prompt.
Okay.
So this part, I think, what is driving this type of results, that you can actually see faces and body structures or even fingers more accurate. As if you just prompt it, have to have like a video as a reference.
So that's kind of image to image, video to video, something to kind of give the model, some lifting. And you know what? That I will say in prior image generations where I'm looking for very specific details, someone's holding something a specific way, the lighting conditions need to be such a way. I know in Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, you could do an image sample in addition to your prompt. And oftentimes the model just goes, okay, I got it. That helps me, not try to have to figure everything out.
It's interesting because with AI video, it's kind of these two paths of the ones which are using video as a reference of you and kind of overlaying whatever you want. And another one is this AI generated avatars where you take the image or the model trained on your realistic images, and then you feed the text. It's two different directions of the control of the output.
I mean, it seems like at some point you're going to have to like, all right, I have to lean on the model to generate something compelling, but I also, as a director, as a producer, as the person creating this, I have a specific vision, and I do need some deterministic, lever in the results to achieve that.
I wanted to share with you this kind of back to reality experience. So let's talk about James. Dancing Greek statues.
Mm-hmm.
Had 1.5 hour talk with him. He's an amazing artist, and we were just geeking out. He was like, I didn't know that you're painting. He went on my Instagram. So we kind of like bonded on this artistic style, and he's just, brilliant. And it's so amazing to hear, that his work took off like that. But then I was showing his work to everybody. This is just how I was just like, you have to see this. And we showed it to our family. The parents-in-law, we were like, they watched it and they're like, oh, okay, it's nice animation. And I was like, you don't understand. This is not animation.
This is James's page. I think this is one of his.
And Elon Musk replied, James was like, we had to reply immediately back. But we don't know if Elon Musk saw his version, because we did with Elon Musk face on it.
This is our pal James. We've talked about him for a couple of weeks now. He's a master of control nets inside of Stable Diffusion, and just so many possibilities. Such fun stuff too. And as we say often on here, these kind of things, they're only going to get better. This is the worst they'll ever be, and they're already compelling. His stuff has been viewed in the last 2-3 weeks over 200 million times.
But going back to this kind of, stepping outside of the AI bubble, it is interesting to me how the outside world perceives these things, because then at the end of the day, there is going to be value attached to that, right?
Yeah.
So while we are geeking out and we're like, oh my God, like I will just pay you as much as possible. I want something like that. The public sees this, as we said, oh, nice animation, as it's like some sort of just, I don't know, Premiere Pro package overlay.
Yeah. That's the only frame of reference they have.
I don't know. For me, that was kind of interesting insight because, at the end of the day, these things will be generalized and actually made available.
Mm-hmm.
Not to minimize the quality and value of James' work, but I also, because of that, I saw, I think, 2 apps popping up saying that, I just upload a video and we generate AI video. And it is this visual effect applied to it. I really don't believe that they run the whole thing. Because when we talked with James, like, if people think that this is just like one-click prompt easy, so wrong.
Not right now.
No, it is so much work, so much iteration, and it costs a lot of money just to run these things.
No one has a concept of. For every frame of those little clips of James we just showed, if it's running at 60 frames a second, which some of those are because they're pretty smooth, 7-second video, that's hundreds and hundreds of frames that individually need to be rendered and stitched together. Unless you have a pretty beefy GPU or paying for some cloud, server horsepower.
Or both.
Yeah, or both. That takes an inordinately long amount of time. So,
talking about GPUs, my video I did about Midjourney, where founder was talking about these 2 futures of AI. One is that to scale anything, we are just bound by physics as a first principle, just as a data centers and chips that we can produce physically. And it will take us 7 years to scale. And that is a reason why Midjourney is not marketed. Yeah. You're not going to see ads for Midjourney or like, hey, there is an app for Midjourney, because there's simply no ability to scale to sustain such a user base. But when he talked about different path, if we invent new chips or new abilities or integrate neural nets and chips, well, it's out of my domain knowledge. And then he said that if this happens, then we scale in a year.
Yeah.
So think what the craziness, what's happening right now. And then if there is next technological breakthrough in the physical department, the hardware.
Well, speaking of hardware,
let's talk.
Yeah. Since we're talking chips, and it is kind of wild to think about, that's why GPT-4 is constrained in terms of like how fast it generates. It's literally the compute. So what's starting to take place is a lot of these big companies are completely rethinking how compute happens. I'm sure people, while they may not know the ins and outs of it, you can conceptualize that all of our stuff, our websites, the apps be like clouds, they're running in these big data centers. These data centers are power hungry, and inside of each one of these servers is essentially a different type of computer that is CPU centric, right? It has a central processing unit. So one of the things that gets inefficient about these is they spend as much time kind of moving around data as they do actually like computing, like doing computations. So that tends to tax and take longer for processes to take place. But with the onset of some of these generative AI technologies, Nvidia, who's the world's leading chip maker, has just put out, it's totally worth the YouTube watch, even if you don't geek out a bunch of this hardware stuff. It is pretty incredible in terms of some of the things they demo. So this is the GraceHopper supercomputer, AI supercomputer. It's basically a singular GPU the size of a school bus, 150 miles of fiber optic cable inside of it. But this singular row of servers, granted it's a lot of servers, are GPU based. So it uses something to the tune of like a 44th of the amount of power that to achieve the same level of compute as this GPU server would, it would need 45 times more power in our conventional servers right now. So you can get way more cost-effective bang for your buck, so to speak. You train a generative image model, train a language model in, fractions of the time, just because of how efficiently this can handle. Like this right here is 140 terabytes of GPU compute power that is all running in series. So it works as one. So I mean, like, these are the kind of things that when all these data center transformations happen, not only will we be able to use AI like we want to, like these are the kind of things that you need to say, okay, supercomputer, we've got 20 of these chained together. Please cure all diseases for us, and it just, can start processing these huge, inconceivably large problems.
I was listening to you. This is fascinating. But I was checking stock price of Nvidia.
It definitely shot up.
And what's sad part is yesterday I was like, I need to buy some shares of Nvidia. And then something happened. And this is, I think, because it's on mobile. So it's almost like, oh yeah, no, now it sounds bad. It's not like you are just casually buying shares, but I think Nvidia is the place where it makes sense.
I mean, they already control something like 85% of the GPU chip
Mass
market.
Capitalization, which is dangerous.
It is. It totally is. And I think there's going to be antitrust stuff coming down the pike eventually. That, Microsoft had to face the same thing when they were, this huge software company in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But, you're going to have this AI arms race that no doubt is going to emerge between these big players like Microsoft, like Google, like Meta, but they all still need this compute. So that server I just showed in the prior screen here a second ago, talking about this huge new GPU central server that Nvidia's invented and put together, it has something like 6 of these chips inside of each server blade. The chips cost $200,000 each, and there's over 1,000 server blades inside of one of these exaflop machines. So that's not something that anybody other than like Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies can even afford to have access to at this point. But considering we've already blown Moore's law out of the water with some of the level of innovations that are happening, it's only going to get cheaper.
I remember I saw this graph where it was looking, learning from history is always a good way to go, and was looking at what happened with semiconductors and SaaS companies, like, big tech, that historically SaaS companies are the ones who win and not the hardware.
Yeah.
But I think the Nvidia case is interesting because as much as they are hardware controlling market, they are coming with their large language models like Neo, right? So it's because we can really attack from all sides and do all these collaborations with the companies. it is even like scary to think when we live in a world where all compute is in one company's hand.
I mean, totally crazy thing. But I got 2 computers right here in front of me. Both got Nvidia GPUs in them.
Right.
Everything else is different and diversified. The GPUs are both Nvidia.
That's interesting. I just got Mac. So remember we were talking about if to get Nvidia, and this one has M2. And I'm very happy with it. But yeah, that's another thing. Like maybe Apple, especially with their, Vision Pro and how much compute, but that's completely 2 ball games. Nvidia is on the whole other racetrack.
And what's always made Mac run so efficiently is since they are developing the silicon and the software in that case, they are able to develop processes, system architectures that run super efficiently on their chips. So they're able to kind of optimize both things. So in many instances, an M2 chip does some of the same things that a big beefy GPU could do for machine learning purposes. But it's only going to enable more creativity, more problems being solved. It's an exciting thing to think about.
On this kind of mass global power, now with Sam Altman and, the leaders of AI labs on Anthropic, Cloud, they're on this world tour, or some of them. And you see these pictures, and every time we see it, Sam Altman meeting some leaders of our presidents or prime minister, those looks like he's a president now. Didn't you? It crossed to you?
He wields a lot of power.
Yeah, and when you look at in this picture, you're like, who in this picture is actually the man of power now?
Yeah. Speaking of power, one of the things that is an interesting kind of discussion point as we're talking about more efficient GPUs and chips and all the things that run behind the scenes to, enable these really wonderful AI technological innovations. I didn't realize this week, I think it also came out in one of the talks, that Sam Altman's a big investor into fusion power research because and maintains even talked about it a little bit. Some of the recent talks this week, we'll link a few in the description of the newsletter, talked about how to achieve things like GPT-5, 6, 7, where you're going to need just so much compute, not only to train, but then to run it, let everybody run it. Like it's going to need fusion power to achieve. So, getting to a point where it's 1/10 of the cost of any energy and then we can make enough of them to go around the world is pretty incredible prospect. And, it's been a promise I've heard it my whole life. Fusion's 30 years away or 40 years away. It's going to happen in the future, but a lot of things that I hear when anytime it comes up, it's like 5 years away.
It kind of gives me an idea that what Sam Altman is not part of or invested. WorldCoin, like scanning your eyeballs, universal basic income.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. The power dynamics are very interesting.
He'll be our main ambassador to the AI overlords.
But on the flip side, there is, again, if we look at historically, first movers in the market are not necessarily the ones leading the market at the end of the day.
Yeah. End of the day.
I'm kind of always running with that thought, but if it's not OpenAI, who is coming?
Yeah. I will say though, just having, worked and been exploring the space for 6 months, there is something about the first mover advantage that's a little just kind of flipped on its head with some of these things, because people are inventing and creating so much and stitching these AI technologies together to form innovative new products and solutions. But at the end of the day, it's to solve very similar problems that people can kind of conceive of themselves. They can go, oh, I see that. I see that. They're not using they're all using the same technology, all using the same language models. Okay. So it's really not a game about whose tech is better. It's about who can market it better. So in a lot of instances I've seen, just as long as you're kind of there to the table first with an idea, that might be enough in some instances. I'll give you an example as it relates to prompt engineering. I happened to start selling some prompts on PromptBase earlier this year, right? It really didn't start taking off till like March or April. But what that's done, because of things like Amazon and how we online shop before, well, what do you do? The first thing you do when you get on Amazon, hey, you're looking for a toothbrush. Hey, let me sort by the 5 stars with the most sales. right? That's just like our condition. I want the best thing that's
Yes,
out
I do
there.
that all the time. Read reviews. I'm
Right.
obsessed.
So in something like this, like I feel like in some instances I've unfairly benefited from that just because I had plenty of sales before this started taking off a little bit more. And what do people do? Hey, what's the top selling in this category? All right. By virtue of being to the table first, that probably benefits me. And I would hope that the creators of prompt-based or some of these marketplaces do things to encourage new creators to put themselves out there.
That makes me think I had this dilemma when I made the first videos going about ChatGPT and learn prompting and prompt engineering, what I was learning. And I remember there was this moment I just made a video about how ChatGPT works and explaining, the model behind it, and it was 3.5. I released this video in a week and a half, where is GPT-4. And I was like, oh, okay, so if I make a video about something which is happening, and this is the thing why I don't like to go news direction, because your video is not relevant next week.
Yeah.
And I was thinking at that time, like, I need to really, think about videos which live long, very meaningful. The thing is that video plus prompt engineering are getting views every single day, like the most. And I'm like, in my world, I'm like, everybody knows already this. And I still read comments from people like, oh, I just discovered this. Wow, I didn't know this. And I'm like, it feels like not 3 months, but 3 years ago. And that just makes me think this is why, I was sharing this story, bringing these AI tools outside of a bubble and actually getting real world perspective. You have to see how the real world actually adapts these things.
It's still trickling out there.
And I think with ChatGPT, when I was doing, this keynote in Embassy, 3 people came to me saying, oh, yeah, I know it. I tried it, but I'm so just disappointed with the results. It's just so basic.
Yep.
And, after my presentation, they're like, oh, so it cannot, like, you can actually control it and make it interesting and it can write in different things. And I was like, to me, it was like, yeah, of course. But people had tried and left it off. And I think it also happens with image tools. You can get very quickly discouraged. And I think this learning prompt engineering, that's why I think it's relevant and it's going to be relevant.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it kind of boggles my mind that some people don't necessarily see the possibilities of it. But people come at this with different needs and different expectations, Like obviously I'm coming at it from someone who's an avid consumer of anything electronic or technological, Look behind me for an indication of that. Does one need 8 keyboards? My wife would say no, but I say otherwise. But I mean, I remember the first time my dad tried ChatGPT. He's like, yeah, I put myself into it, came up, didn't know anything about me. It's kind of milquetoast. And I'm like, this is not how large language models work. Let me tell you about how it's only trained up till September 2021 and about hallucinations, so.
Yeah, the basic things you need to know.
But that's not on the,
No.
on the front page at all.
No, it's at the bottom, tiny letters.
Yeah. This might be totally made up.
Not factual, wrong facts, information. Oh, yeah, that's the whole other thing, We already talked about this, that there is a certain level of responsibility when you drop a product like that to the mass market.
Yeah.
With no information, what it is, how it is, nothing. It's just like, hey, chatbot. That's it.
But I think some of it is like, all right, let's let people play around with it and explore while the stakes are low, as opposed to have this AGI that's ready and then they drop it on us and there's this huge shift that needs to happen. There's probably some value in it slowly. Granted, how slowly can you say? It's still the fastest growing app or service in history. But, it's still probably some value in letting it kind of trickle down.
Who values from that?
I mean, it's probably the altruism of our great ambassador overlord, Sam Altman, and those kind of investors.
I hope people learned one thing. Nothing on internet is free.
Yeah.
So if there is something free, it's not free. Like you are trading off different value. And I worked in big data analytics company. The amount people pay for data and especially investment banks, it's insane. It's millions upon millions. So I think that's what people don't realize, that just the volume of data from this type of usage, that what you said, it's a number one, most trending website or something like that.
It's literally vertical growth. That's if you map it against anything else.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
okay, but let's talk something prompting.
yes.
Now that we're leading to that, I wanted to share something with you, coming back to my past afterlife in architecture and design.
Yeah.
I saw this design piece. It's foldable sofa, which can fit in an envelope, designed by AI. So this is the sofa, and so it's Studio 10 in Copenhagen. I actually know the studio, and I'm almost sure I've been there. But anyway, so it's developed closely with Ikea. You see this modular system, and it's around 10 kilos. But the interesting thing that they went with first talking with ChatGPT. For example, one of them is saying, I actually wrote into ChatGPT, could a couch fit into an envelope? And of course it said no. And then we went to Midjourney and DALL-E, and we're spending like hundreds of prompts testing different words, terminology, and nothing worked really to achieve what they were looking for. And it was that you, on a sofa, you're not front facing like to the TV, but you're actually sitting in front facing each other. And the keyword which they discovered that actually led to that was conversation pit.
Conversation pit.
Right. So now we build it.
See, I would think that something like that is a product of like a machine learning or a labeling AI where it takes in tons of different designs and analyzes it and goes, this is the most ergonomic way to do this. But it's from a language, a generative language model, just kind of going, this is what I think it would look like.
Yeah, but generative models is actually nothing new in our AI space, especially when you look in a parametric design. Even when I was doing my bachelor thesis, I was actually using this GraceHopper plugins in a Rhinos model to do parametric design, and then you can play with some generative design pieces. But the diffusion models is different.
Yes.
That's something new. And the generative AI, you have, in a way, you have more control because it's like more like real data-based. And I could be completely wrong. Like this is just, I'm kind of surface sliding through this topic right now. But diffusion models in architecture for render are amazing. But when you want real design vector-based, because, you need centimeter, millimeter control of the dimensions, that's kind of a different realm. So I'm keeping a close eye on what's happening in architecture space design, because, imagine like if it goes that route, another explosion.
There's a huge market, and I've seen some things for people exploring it, from prompting to some 3D design, prompting to vectors. No one has cracked it yet, but there's a few things. I think we brought it up on the podcast before. We have people that are doing generative AI via prompting to create assets for computer games that can be used inside of Unreal 5 engine. I'll try to see if I can find them right now, but I know there's a company that does text prompt to 3D STL model. So you can basically just type in a prompt and then have what you would need to 3D print it, to throw it into the slicer and then, put it through.
Leonardo AI, for anybody looking for a game development, like what the guys behind it, like I think I told you about Ethan, one of the co-founders. We were, back in the days before Leonardo, we were just geeking out in the Discord channels. It's just incredible. I think they are reaching millions of users now in such a short time. And that also makes me think, a year ago, I made this video, which is who's going to build in metaverse, AI or architects. And in that video, I made completely like just, going down the rabbit hole of this idea. I was like, in the future, you just prompt and say, I want the desert with flying buildings made of diamonds, wherever space. And boom, AI generates that 3D environment space for you. And now a year later, the VR space is generated by AI.
That's coming down the pike.
Back then, I remember when I wrote it, I was like, oh, probably people will be like, what she's talking about? It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're every day, like I said, it must be what it felt like to see an airplane fly in the sky for the first time, something so divergent from your experiences up until this date. Speaking of things that we haven't seen before, a natural progression. We've talked about some text to video. We've talked about some of our friends that are, some luminaries and thought leaders in the space. How long do you think it's going to be until we see a full-on prompted movie?
I think it's in the workings right now.
Definitely. I mean,
so this was a setup question. You're like,
you know
definitely.
it. Come on, I got an agenda here. We just gotta try to be like professional podcasters here.
Yeah. Okay. So I was more thinking about like full length cinema, but of course this piece from the Frost is already like takes you a step back to think, what is the future of animation?
And not even animation. I think, look, make no mistake, there's still some uncanny valley. Our brains are so used to we're just looking at other people. So anytime their face or hands are doing something that's not natural to what we're just used to seeing all the time, we notice it. So that's definitely apparent in these type of things too. But this is a 13-minute completely generated, AI movie. You could follow the narrative structure easily. That's not lost at all. And in some ways, some of the choices they've made because of the current technological limitations could just be stylistic ones that, might be said, hey, we made this deliberately. This kind of, kind of blocky, chunky kind of movements and stuff like that. I'd still say like half of these shots, I think the human ones admittedly are hard, but like half of them are still like ones that, I'd be like, all right, that'd be something I'd see in a movie. I'm just going to jump around a little bit, Okay,
but I want to kind of take the different camp on this one.
Please do.
Especially as a content creator and editor, my own videos. When you see the composition, the color grading, the transitions, because it was edited by a human, the creative decisions of the storytelling, of the scenes, the central composition, leading lines, all this matters were still decided by a human.
Yeah.
Or if you tell me that this was completely just a prompt and the composition, the mood, because every element in a movie you see a 3/3 golden rule, like all these things are deliberately there. It's human who makes those decisions. But of course, for example, Midjourney makes incredible images and you can see these composition decisions just adapted. But do you think in this case, was it too?
I mean, I think it probably was in a lot of instances, but you're absolutely right. The true power here is when you have someone with expertise and creativity, working alongside AI. Right now, some of these things, like this is not, they wouldn't pass for a Hollywood movie at this point. Like you got Play It behind you, but it's not too far off. It looks kind of like 80s or 90s special effects in some degree.
So I'm not saying that it's not good, but I really still think that final creative decisions is going to be made by a human. Of course,
should be.
maybe if we go like what I did a year ago and we say that, okay, in a year or two, but the whole movies are going to be generated by AI, I think in Black Mirror episode, they teased this moment where you are watching kind of Netflix and you're seeing representation of yourself, and the character is like, oh, it's like she's just like me, like talks like me, looks like me. So where did they get this data from? And Black Mirror is coming out tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm so excited. I miss them so much.
Well, more of those coming out, and who knows if there's going to be some additional things happening
Black Mirror
in that regard. Well, kind of on the same vein as what we're discussing here about creativity and still needing to have that final creative decision. One thing I don't think we've brought up on the pod yet is we've touched on it a little bit in terms of some of the legal implications for these generative models, what they've been trained on. And if folks aren't aware, there's it's going to be a fight in a lot of different ways. And the first one that's going to be waging the war, doing the battle, is Stable Diffusion. This article right here is back from February, but just in the past week, they released that, hey, this is going to trial. We'll include a bunch more examples of some of the images that look even more similar to the initial sample ones. But yeah, and I've gotten this before. I'll even post some of my generations where it has the little Getty Images swirl, or it has the watermark lines that clearly, was someone's photo. But Getty's suing Stable Diffusion for the landmark amount of 1.8 trillion, the largest lawsuit ever, for the 12 million images that they claim were in the sample database, and they're claiming damages of $150,000 per image.
Yeah. And oh my God, we can dive into this because I was looking into this training data model, which was Stable Diffusion bot, which is Lion, it's called. Yeah. And we will include in the newsletter, there is a link where you can actually upload and check what is the chance that your image was used in the training data. But the amounts are staggering, and it's known that they did use this data.
Right.
And it's just interesting that I read somewhere that there was Shutterstock and Getty Images was striking a deal with these to get, get paid. And it just looks to me like that deal maybe didn't go through, and with the sentiment from art community, they just went full on. But
then how do you even quantify, the use of it? Because let's take this image here. Obviously, there's remarkable similarities, but there's also still some differences. Obviously some uncanny valley here with guy's leg, color of the ball is different, face is not human, but also their body position is different. So does Getty get paid kind of like a Spotify streamer might for one stream? Every time a model is trained with one of their images, they get a fraction of a cent for each of those licensed ones? Or is it when someone generates something new? Well, we've determined that this image is 75% like this image over here on the left, so you owe 75% of a royalty, to this one, and 25% to something else.
The very interesting art piece in the Museum of Modern Art, there is a video, but basically what Modern Museum of Art did, they pulled their whole database, what you are seeing here. So they looked at correlations and created this whole data network cloud, right? This is the images and then all this black space in between. The thing is, this is such a good representation of how these models work and why when artists, you see here, why the artists, when they went to sue all these models, none of those lawsuits went through. And the reason is because OpenAI stability, everyone came back and said, prove me that we are using exactly your image. Because when you're generating an image, what it does, and in this piece it will show, that all this black space, generative diffusion models, they fill it. That the new images generated between the similar images. And, for example, if you take one of these, and the black space, the next image next to this one, will have the closest neural net link, like the vector. So in that case, the idea would be like that, okay, the images which are in this radium close to my image could be like a license or a royalty, right?
Yeah. I thought for such debate still, there's so many ways you can take that.
I know. And then what they did, they visualized this whole transition of this all generated images, but factually, then the pieces shown, none of the pieces, actual pieces, are displayed.
So nothing is a 99% match.
So this, like, it's non-stop morphing, but it's morphing between, here you go. So we have it. So this is the images. He's flying using joystick through those images. And then the black space, they filled that, okay, now generate images to fill the whole cloud of images.
Yeah.
And then we will morph through them, through these new generated links between. And for me, that was like, the best explanation of how these generative models work. If you go in a law case and you say like, but none of the new produced images actually have exactly copy of your image. And it's a tricky argument they are using,
And that
but there is an easy solution to that.
What's that?
Just develop like a coordinate system or metadata system or like licensing or copyright thing in the image, and just define the radius that, okay, there is a certain spectrum. Everything is spectrum. Nothing is like just true or not. So if my image and the spectrum, the images get close to my style, to my original image, I get a royalty.
I mean,
from free open source model.
It's not quite that simple, because
when
you look at that globe there, right? That is an undirected network. What that means in network science context, it's not like you start with one thing and it makes these decisions linearly. The way these diffusion models work is they not only can identify what images are, they understand how they interact with each other. So it won't necessarily be this linear decision of, okay, we used a little bit from this sample image, then went over here and used some of this, then came back to this neighborhood of cluster, and on the way we had to fill in some stuff that we didn't have any samples for. It's more so it just kind of does it all at once. So I think that still being able to track it in a way that's methodical, where you can even say that like, hey, 75% of this is the same. Well, all right, let's use that argument to say that's the case. If I'm not mistaken, I am no legal expert, but I found this kind of surprising. In my beloved country to the north, Canada, with my understanding that for using a trademark logo, for example, if you make one change to that logo, change one color, add something, that is now a derivative and it's a separate thing. So if something is 75% the same, but 25% different, that's a derivative.
Yeah, and this is absolutely true. And I'm looking at another law case, which actually this artist, Carol Highsmith, and this was in 2016. She sued back then Getty Images for $1 billion because they were using her images and actually sent her. This is a funny story. She didn't win, but the funny story is they sent her a bill for license, but she's using license of her own work illegally. And this is how she found out, but they've been stealing her work for years and licensing and charging people. And now we try to charge author herself.
Oops.
Yeah. Well, so she went like $1 billion in damages.
Yeah.
Didn't win.
We need to have a lawyer on here. It's such interesting decisions that to me, it's, I'm hopeful, but also the people that are going to be making these decisions around the world are not of our generation and younger. I mean, these are people that may not even be able to conceive and understand and have an appreciation for some of these things. So, I mean, I don't envy them. It's going to be very challenging kind of decisions and complexities to sort
I'm just
through.
running
But
in my mind about like all the network of legal. Even if I know a lawyer, I would be like, does this lawyer know the intricacies of this?
Yeah,
This
we
is
need an
so
AI lawyer.
new. Yeah, it's funny. Like we have a contact in the patent department. So now I'm thinking that would be interesting conversation. But yeah,
Yeah, I
we will
mean-
be bringing up guests. So
Yes,
that's one
we
legal.
have a lot more of that on the horizon too in future weeks of filmed video HTTTA. So I think with that, this is a good enough place to call it quits for the week. So for Go to Go, I am Wes the Synth Line saying happy prompting, everybody.
Happy prompting, everybody.
As always, you can check out the show notes and links at howtotalkto.ai. That's all for this week's episode. Happy prompting, everyone.